Hi, and welcome to another session of Activity Director Best You Can Be. And tonight we're going to talk about cultural competency. And one of the things that people don't realize is that when we have multiple cultures together and we don't acknowledge those other cultures, those cultures then feel unseen and on the peripheral of our communities. So the most important thing that we can do is be inclusive. And the best way to really acknowledge that you're being inclusive to somebody is to start to learn about their culture and then actually do activities that include some of their cultural traditions, their values, their beliefs, so that then they are saying, oh, this group, this community now is recognizing me as an individual, and I'm becoming a part of them. And once we start sharing what we know about other cultures and about our own cultures and how they fit together and how we can accept them, or we can at least start to understand them better, this is what is important. However, when we don't address cultural differences at all, we are doing what is called cultural destruction. In other words, we're ignoring it, we're blocking it out, we're not accepting it, we're not validating those people for the things that they believe are important. And that is called cultural destruction. It is very divisive and very unkind. The second phase of understanding cultural awareness is that sometimes we learn about different cultures, but then we don't do anything with it. It's called cultural incapacity. The third phase is called cultural blindness. That means we understand what the culture is, we accept what the culture is, but we're not inclusive with that culture, so we're being culturally blind, and again, we're separating groups of people and holding them apart from each other. Once we reach cultural humanity is when we understand what the culture is, we accept what the culture is, and then we start acting and doing activities that involves that culture or helps to blend cultures together. So for example, if I was doing a cooking group and I was going to make some chicken noodle soup, if I wanted to be more inclusive and include an Indian type of chicken noodle soup, the first thing that I would need to do is go talk to that person who is familiar with Indian cooking or enjoys Indian cooking. And they would share that with me then and tell me, oh, this is how you use the curry. This is how you prepare the chicken. This is why you put the chicken foot in the soup. Now we have an understanding of both cultures, the way this culture would do it and the way the Indian culture would do it. And once we do that, we are not holding that culture separate. We are now saying, okay, I understand what you told me. This is very interesting. I think we should try it. And then we do it together. And then we can decide, oh, I like this, or I don't care for that taste as much. But now we are accepting each other's cultures. And we're saying, I understand why you did this. I like the smell of this. I like the taste of this. Oh, I'm not so sure I like the taste of this. Maybe this is too spicy for me. But now we are acknowledging each other as individuals and as individuals with different cultures. So this is what's important. So we want to get beyond cultural destruction, beyond cultural incapacity where we're not doing anything with the culture, and beyond cultural blindness where we're not being inclusive in our activities by sharing what we know about each other's cultures. So that would be one of the ways that you could start to bring your communities, your buildings, your cultures together and break down the barriers of miscommunication and misunderstanding. One of the other things that we want to do when we're looking at culture is to make sure that we know not only about the cultural traditions, but also about how people perceive their space around them and how they use their gestures and their tone of voice and other attitudes that communicate different feelings. So here's one of them. Sometimes Americans like very much to talk directly to your face because they feel that's being honest and genuine with you. And so they will talk directly eye to eye with you and they won't break their gaze. Where other cultures feel that that's very rude, that they shouldn't stare at you, that that's intimidating. And so they will cast their eyes down and look at you briefly, and then cast their eyes down and look at you briefly. Now, this is done a lot in South Pacific cultures and in African cultures where they don't look at you directly. They feel that that is a very rude thing to do. So they'll put their gazes down. Another thing that will happen is how we actually understand the words that we're trying to express between our different languages, or the intent of our words in between different languages. So this sometimes happens in Asian cultures, because in Asian cultures, they will say yes to everything that you tell them. Now, this does not mean they're saying, yes, I'm going to do this. It's saying, yes, I understand it. And that's a big difference. And sometimes for business people, that has been very difficult to understand, that when an Asian person is saying, yes, 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 that simply means I understand what you're saying to me. It doesn't mean I go along with the idea or I like the idea. We have to be very careful of that. Then the other thing is how people use spaces around them. Some people don't. Most people are more accepting of the fact that they should have at least 2 feet between them to feel this is my territory and this is my safe space, and they won't want you to come any closer than that. Other people find that it has to be a little bit farther, and they do not like to have any physical contact, touching of shoulders or shaking hands. They would prefer to nod their head in acknowledgement. Okay, the other thing on some of the other gestures that people do that get misunderstood is many Americans feel that saying thumbs up, that means great, good, fine job. In some other cultures, that is not what that means. That is a very negative connotation when you go thumbs up. That means that's really something really bad and you shouldn't have done that, or you're going to pay for that. So we have to understand that different gestures, the different tone of voice, how words are actually used in communication have different meanings through different cultures. The other one that you should be aware of is that many people in certain European countries like to kiss on both cheeks. And that is a sign of trust and friendship, where many Americans would not consider kissing a sign of trust, but a handshake would be a sign of trust. So those are some of the things that you should watch for. And then I'd like to share with you one incident that happened to me when I was doing my groups. I had done a lot of stuff in May for Mother's Day, and we just finished up with Easter. And the staff asked me, could we do Cinco de Mayo Day? And I wasn't too excited about doing it because I just spent a lot of money on these other parties. And they said to me, well, Connie, we have a lot of Spanish-speaking people in our building, and we have a lot of staff that is Spanish-speaking. And they're coming from multiple countries that speak Spanish, from Ecuador and from Mexico and from Brazil. And even though these are different, let's at least acknowledge some of these traditions that are associated with Cinco de Mayo, which is the Independence Day of Mexico. And so I said, all right, well, we'll go ahead and do this. And so the chef decided he would make burritos and tacos and rice and beans. And he also made some Mexican pastry, which is not as sweet as American pastry. So he made those and made the little cookies for those. And they had some children come in that did the Mexican hat dance, and they had piñatas, and we had people in our wheelchairs knocking the piñatas, and little kids knocking the piñatas and playing Spanish music and Latin American rhythms. And it was a really fun time. And you know what? It was one of the most important events that we did in that building that year, because we acknowledged different cultures. Not only did we acknowledge them, but we used activities to share that culture and to learn about that culture. And now these people who had felt marginalized were no longer marginalized. And as a result, we had more Spanish food, we had more Spanish music, we had more communication among people, working hard at understanding what others were saying and what words actually meant. And so it became a very, very important thing, because what we were saying to these people is, we see you, we understand you, we respect your values and your beliefs and your traditions, and we're enjoying them too. And that's why cultural differences need to be shared. We need to learn from each other. And once you do that in your facilities, you're going to find that people will come together. There'll be more trust, there'll be more understanding, there'll be more acceptance. And we all need that if we want to have quality of life and if we want to have person-centered care. All right, well, that's our take tonight on cultural differences and why it's so important to break down cultural barriers, share ideas, share concepts, and let people learn from each other and decide how they're going to move forward so that there is peace in the community and understanding in the community. All right, well, we'll see you later, and our next talk will probably be on intergenerational concepts. Thank you for joining Activity Director Best You Can Be, and we'll leave some more tips for you in the future. All right, good night. Hello, and thank you for joining us on another little segment of Activity Director Best You Can Be. Tonight we're going to talk about intergenerational activities. Now, it is really important to have intergenerational activities, because when people are in long-term care or in assisted living and they have limited access to different age groups and different attitudes, we become narrow-minded. And some people are going to actually really love the intergenerational stuff, and other people are not going to be interested in it. They're finished with raising their kids, or they didn't have really strong relationships with younger people. But it is important that we do understand younger generations and older generations. And so that's why it's important that we bring these two groups together and do some activities that they can jointly enjoy. So we're going to talk about 3 different types of intergenerational activities. First will be our younger people, like our preschool. Then we'll talk about the people of high school. And then we'll bring in intergenerational activities that are community-oriented, where older adults get together and talk with each other from different concepts and perspectives. So the first one that we'll talk about is our little preschoolers. Now, we have a lot of people in the United States who do not live close to their grandmothers. And we have a lot of grandparents that miss their grandkids. And one of the things that we can do to help solve this is we can have intergenerational activities. One of the best ways to do this, to get it started in your programming, is to call up the preschool closest to you and have them come over and have the 3, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds walk around your building and sing Christmas carols and their Jingle Bell songs. And they love that. Another time when it's good to invite them over is when they're walking around in their Halloween costumes and we pass out candy to them. And you'll find that once you do these quick sort of like visits where the kids get to walk around and parade or sing a song for you and show you that they know that song, then they start to warm up to each other. And one of the most fun things that you can do to get kids and seniors to relate to each other is have little relay races and have the people in the wheelchairs at one end of the room and the children lined up at the other room. Before we start to talk about this, I want to share one important fact when you're having the preschoolers in your building. They cannot sit in our furniture because it's too big, and they tend to slide out or slide under the arms. So I found it was very important to make some little rugs, some hook rugs, and make sure that they had their little rug that they could sit on, because I didn't want them sitting right on the cold linoleum or on the carpeting. And that way they would have a place to go to and they would know where they would be comfortable. And it wasn't cold because it was a nice little rug to sit on. And they weren't very big, they were maybe about 12 inches by 12 inches, round little rugs. So we would put those down and the kids would sit on their little rugs. And then when we're doing our relay races, they would get up and put the spoon in their mouth and carry the thing down to their partner, their senior partner, and give it to them, and the next child would do it. And so we'd have people lined up and we'd have a relay race to see how many kids could get down to their point person the fastest, and they get a prize for that. And then of course we play games like Simon Says and things like that. And now they got to the point where they were comfortable walking around the wheelchairs and they were comfortable being around the seniors. And the seniors loved it and gave them extra praise and extra love and congratulations for the things that they did. Another thing that we like doing with our seniors is doing crafts, making cards with the glue sticks and stuff like that. And they could we would push their chairs into the table so they wouldn't be flip-flopping around as much. And we assigned people to each other. And we made sure that they were happy to be with each other and encouraging. But we made like a lot of cards, and they would give us cards and we would give them cards. The other thing that would happen, now this happened with a little older group. We had one little lady come in and she said, I would like to have a birthday party, but I really don't need any gifts. So I'm going to come and have a birthday party at your facility if you will let me. And I'm going to have all my friends, instead of having them buy me a gift, I'm going to ask that they bring some flowers that we can plant in your garden. So she did that for her birthday, and she had 6 little girls come. And they talked, and we talked, and we had cake, and we sang songs. And then the next year, it got to be a very popular thing where this little girl would ask her friends to bring a plant to our facility and plant it and then have birthday cake and sing songs and stuff like that and play around in the garden, basically have a garden party. It got so big that we ended up having probably about 15 kids and several of the parents come. So we made a big sheet cake and it got to be very popular. And what happened then is our outside community started to know our inside community. And a lot of people who weren't always that enthused about it really started to enjoy the children, especially when they were planting plants together and talking about plants and talking about other things that they like to do and talking about songs that they like to sing and things that were important to them and things that hurt their feelings. And it just became a wonderful interactive activity. Now, these children, they did this. This was a little girl that had her birthday parties at our building, probably from the age of about 7 to about 14 or 15. And then after that, she came over with some of her friends, and they would do board games in the evening, or they would do the bingo games. And so it got to be fun where these people, some of my people didn't outlive these kids, but they basically had a relationship with a lot of my people in the building for about a good 5 years, which was a really strong thing to do. So the other group that I'd like to talk to you about are the high schoolers. High schoolers are absolutely fantastic. Have them come in. They will paint nails. They will read stories to people. They will pass out newspaper articles and have discussions. Well, this is how young people feel about this. And then the older people say, well, this is how we feel about this. And that became a very positive thing. It became a grandparent sort of like adoption program. Or the kids would say, my parents always pressure me to do something, to decide what I'm going to be. And I have no idea what I'm going to decide to be. And so there was wisdom behind the doors, and there were emotions behind the doors. And because these two groups of high schoolers and older people who were not their parents could have conversations about real life problems that they have been through and that the younger people were starting to go through. So it was a very positive thing and very healthy for everybody. And the other thing that I did for the high schoolers, if they were looking to go to a college, or we would document or looking for a job, we would document what they did in our building, how well they did it, and how many hours they put into it. And actually, we had a couple of children or young adults who got into very good schools or got very good jobs from our recommendations. They really did a fine service for us by coming in and volunteering and having an intergenerational program. Now, the final group that we need to talk about is the older adults. Sometimes you just want to invite the community in and allow them to use your building as a public speaking interaction. Like, say, if the mayor is going to be running for office, or the councilman has issues that they want to bring up on how they want to change the community or what would benefit the community. So now this gives a talking time instead of just watching things on the news. This gives an actual discussion and interaction, sort of like a town hall, where people talk about things that are important in their community. And this was very important because instead of isolating our older adults in a living situation, now they were branching out and were seeing what was going on in the community, outside the community and in the area around which they were living, and they became much more connected with the community. And that became really important because, you know, what would happen when we would go on our outings, we would see some of these people that came in to visit us, whether they were the little people or whether they were the high schoolers or whether they were the community leaders. So this really was important to have this intergenerational activity and friendship and communication between all these different generations. And they found that there was probably, as human beings we usually do, there was more common ground or common experiences that they had lived or the younger people were starting to go through, so that there was a real bonding and a friendship and a trust that maybe would not have been there if they hadn't had these experiences together. So I really want to encourage you to have intergenerational activities in your building so that people get to know each other and understand each other and form a community where they can relate to each other. All right, that's all for this evening, and we will see you next time in another episode of Activity Director, Best You Can Be. Thank you and good night.